Okay, we're going to talk about some of the data documents, definitions, and some of our constraints that we can put inside our files. Now, here we have, notice the less than and question mark, open and closing, meaning to execute this. Normally, when you see these type of tags, we're looking at some type of scripting. However, and here we're just telling it when we're using XML, which again is a data type definition, what version and what encode am I going to use. This does not mean that I'm going to have to use XML, but it just means that I might be using XML and I need this to work with my doc type. Okay, doc types. We talked about just saying an HTML doc type, but here we're also going to tell it what rules we're going to follow as far as coding. We have strict here, and strict is the highest level you can get. It means that I have to follow all patterns and all rules, such as one of the attributes rules, and I'm just going to type it here instead of where it belongs down the bottom, is, well, actually I have one here. Here is my attribute, assignment, and then the value. There is an attribute that we can use on a form element is something like if it's required. However, instead of just saying required like we used to, and it will work with that. If I'm using strict, I have to stick with the guidelines that say I have to have a pattern. So this is what we're looking at. All rules must apply, and you might have to look a lot of the rules up because some of the other things, and it's a lot to do with forms, we're looking at strict. Now, I put a couple of links in your Beyond the Book, and one of them is the list that you can use. For instance, we use strict. Notice that 5 and beyond just use this particular type. But if I'm going to use a validator, I need to tell it how to look at my code. So we use strict in the one example, but we could use transitional, which is a loosely applied, not all rules. We can also have some of the others that we look at. Here's XHTML, same thing. If I want to use a math-based one, and there's a lot of others we can work with down here. Now I showed you, I put the link for the validator, and notice again, it's the W3 org validator, W3C. The validator is kind of like a compiler, so I can tell it I want to check a file I've already created, and I can go get it. Now, I've got more options, whether I can tell it other things like detect automatically, or I can go in and tell it which one I'm using if I don't have a character encoding. Document type, I can do transitional instead of strict if I don't have that line in, only if missing. And I can tell it to try and clean up my code automatically. I probably wouldn't do that unless I made sure I have a saved copy somewhere. Anyway, when you go check, it's going to come up and try and give you all your warnings and errors. Remember, warnings we don't really have to fix. And sometimes not all the errors have to be fixed because they might just be giving you a deprecated or maybe one that is obsolete. Doesn't mean it won't work. It's just telling you it's obsolete. Okay. So that's the type of validator, and you can play around with it. There's some other settings on it. Okay. Now some other we can look at are the notice on the strict DTD. That's an actual file it's going to open. If I wanted to see what was in that file, I could copy it and I could put it in my browser, and it's going to bring the code up eventually, it'll take a little while because this is a long code and I'm working on it. So yeah, we could put that in our browser and it would either, depending on what we want to do, download it, or it would show us the code. All right, now in my HTML tag, I'm telling it that my XML namespace is held within this directory. And we could look at that also. And I'm going to continue on with some of the meta tags. We've looked at a meta tag before, but just as a reinforcement, our meta tags are descriptions about data. So on this one, here is my property, and it is assigned a content type. Content, text, and it's HTML, and it's a character set, UTF-8. And then some of the other ones I could use another meta tag. Again, we've looked at these before, and I could tell it that I want a keyword, and it is, oh sorry, I want the description, and it's a keyword, and it's content. And on here, if I want my browser, whenever they type in the search engine something like HTML tutorial, I can use 2 words as long as I put the quotes around it, or a comma after it, or I can just use 1 word. Okay. And there's some other meta tags. We've looked at a few of them. And here, remember we talked about comments. There's the opening, there's the closing. And normally, again, we always have something about an abstract, what's it doing, who's the author, what's the date it was created or last modified, keep the history. Okay, what's the file name, and then any files that it uses. In case I alter something in Works, I want to make sure that it doesn't affect any of these files, or if I change anything in firework.gif, it doesn't affect mine. And I can use comments throughout the program. I could put a comment here. I could have put a comment at the end. Notice everything turns green. As long as I end it, it's kind of like any of your other languages like Java or C. They all have these same capabilities. Okay, this was mostly a descriptive video. We didn't do a whole lot in it. You can play around with some more meta tags, and we will inside the future. Good luck. Continue on.